Today, we delve into the tragic and heartbreaking story of Marquicha Thomas, a 28-year-old mother of 8, whose life was cut short by a senseless act of violence. Marquicha's life, filled with love for her children and dreams of a better future, was violently taken by her boyfriend, Byron Pipkin, in a moment of unchecked rage. It's a story that shakes us to the core, a story of domestic violence that left a lasting scar not only on her family but on an entire community. Marquicha, a mother struggling to navigate the challenges of life, did everything she could to care for her children, to give them a future. But the very person who should have been her support system, her partner, turned out to be the one who betrayed her in the most unimaginable way. In this video, we will walk through the tragic details of that fateful day and explore how one argument escalated into a violent, irreversible tragedy. As we reflect on this story, it's important to remember that Marquicha's death is not just a story of a woman taken too soon, it's a painful reminder of the reality that many people face in abusive relationships. Domestic violence is an issue that continues to affect millions around the world. It's a problem that often remains hidden behind closed doors, but it's a reality that demands our attention, our empathy, and our action. As we explore the events that led to Marquicha's death, we ask you, the viewer, to reflect on the importance of recognizing the signs of domestic violence, the significance of support systems, and the role each of us can play in ending such abuse. Let's take a moment to understand the profound impact Marquicha's death had not only on her children but on everyone who loved her. This is the story of Marquicha Thomas, a life stolen, and a family left to pick up the pieces. Before we dive deeper into today's chilling case, we want to take a moment to engage with you, our viewers. If you find our stories impactful and want to help support the growth of our channel, please take a second to subscribe. Subscribing ensures that you're always updated with our latest content, and it helps us reach a larger audience, allowing us to continue bringing you fresh crime stories and detailed analyses every day. We genuinely value your thoughts, so feel free to leave your comments below. Share your views on this case, and don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. It's always fascinating to see how far our stories reach. By liking, sharing, and commenting on our videos, you play an essential role in expanding this community and raising awareness. Your participation makes a difference. Thank you for being part of this journey. Now, let's continue with the story. Marquicha Thomas, at just 28 years old, was a dedicated mother who loved her 8 children with everything she had. Like so many young mothers, she dreamed of providing a better life for her family. Her days were filled with the struggles and joys of raising a large family, navigating the challenges of motherhood, balancing work, and caring for her children, each one of them a precious part of her heart. Despite the hardship she faced, Marquicha remained strong, loving, and fiercely protective of her kids. Her life, however, wasn't easy. As a single mother, she was often stretched thin, doing everything she could to give her children the stability and love they deserved. She worked tirelessly to make ends meet, often sacrificing her own needs to make sure her children had what they needed. For Marquicha, her children were her world. She would always find a way to make them smile, to ensure that they felt safe and loved. In the midst of all of this, Marquicha found herself in a relationship with Byron Pipkin. On the surface, Byron seemed to be just like any other man trying to build a life with someone he cared about. He came into her life as a boyfriend, a man who, at first, was supposed to be a support system, someone to share the burdens of life with and, ultimately, help care for her children. But as we know all too well, sometimes appearances can be deceiving. Byron, the man who was supposed to stand by Marquicha, began to reveal a darker side, a side of him that would ultimately spell tragedy. Byron Pipkin, over time, became more than just a partner. He became obsessed, controlling, and, ultimately, violent. What started as a seemingly normal relationship gradually turned toxic. Marquicha's relationship with Byron was not one of mutual respect and love but one of manipulation and fear. His temper, which Marquicha once tried to manage, spiraled out of control. What was supposed to be a partnership slowly became a trap, a dangerous and suffocating cycle that Marquicha found herself unable to escape. As Byron's behavior grew more erratic, the relationship became more volatile. His jealousy, his need for control, and his possessiveness began to overshadow any sense of peace or safety Marquicha once had. She, like so many others trapped in abusive relationships, struggled in silence. But she never stopped trying to protect her children, trying to hold on to the love she had for them and trying to keep her family intact. The man she thought would support her and her children became the very source of fear. And it was this man, this person who should have been there to protect her, that would tragically play a role in her untimely death. Byron Pipkin, who once was a partner, ultimately became the person responsible for the devastation of her family. The man who was supposed to stand by her side in life became the reason for her final moments. What started as a relationship built on promises and love ended in an unimaginable act of violence. On that fateful day, what began as a simple disagreement between Marquicha and Byron quickly escalated into something far more dangerous. Like many couples, they had their arguments. Small issues that, at times, could be worked through with understanding and patience. But this time, things were different. Byron's temper had been growing increasingly uncontrollable, and on this particular day, that anger reached its breaking point. What started as a normal disagreement between a couple who had been together for some time soon turned into a confrontation that would forever alter their lives. The words spoken in frustration, the accusations thrown back and forth, only served to ignite a flame of fury in Byron. His rage clouded his judgment, and instead of stopping to breathe, to think, he let his emotions consume him. The argument escalated with every passing moment, and soon, the situation was no longer something that could be resolved with words. Byron's uncontrollable anger led to a decision that would change everything. His violence had already been simmering for a while, but now it was boiling over. He reached for the weapon that would seal Marquicha's fate, and without warning, he shot her. The sound of the gunshot rang out, shattering what had once been the life they had tried to build together. The horror of the moment didn't just impact Marquicha, it left an indelible mark on the children who had already witnessed so much turmoil in their young lives. In the yard, as Marquicha fell, a terrifying silence settled over the scene, one that would forever haunt the minds of those who were present. Among the most affected by this tragedy was their 12-year-old child, who was hiding in a car nearby. The child, a mere witness to a scene no one should ever have to see, watched in horror as the chaos unfolded. They saw their mother, someone who was loved and cherished, fall victim to an act of unimaginable violence. The emotional weight of that moment was crushing, and for the child, it would be a memory they would carry for the rest of their life. The trauma that this young child experienced in that moment can never be fully understood. To witness a parent's life being taken in such a brutal and sudden manner is something no child should ever have to endure. The fear, the confusion, and the sense of helplessness that must have filled their heart in those crucial moments are unfathomable. It was a moment that would forever change them, a moment where innocence was stolen, leaving behind only the weight of loss and the scars of a violent reality. In the aftermath, the rest of Marquicha's children were left in a state of disbelief. Their mother, the one who had given them everything, was gone, taken from them in an instant. The house, once filled with laughter and the noise of everyday life, was now a place of silence and sorrow. For them, life would never be the same again. After committing the horrific act that ended Marquicha's life, Byron's violence did not stop there. In a chilling and callous move, he turned his attention to the couple's 6-year-old child. The innocent child, already traumatized by the shooting, was now thrust into even greater danger. In a moment of panic and confusion, Byron abducted the young child, dragging them into a nightmare that no one, especially not a child, should ever have to experience. This kidnapping only added to the chaos and fear that had already consumed the family. For the child, the world they once knew had shattered into a terrifying reality, one where they were no longer safe in the arms of their mother or within the walls of their home. To be taken by the very person who had just taken their mother's life is a betrayal that cuts deep. The child, vulnerable and frightened, now found themselves caught in a desperate and dangerous situation. After fleeing the scene, Byron continued his reckless path. His actions were not just driven by rage but by a deep sense of desperation. As authorities were alerted to the situation, a massive manhunt began, with law enforcement working tirelessly to locate him and the kidnapped child. The pursuit eventually led them to Memphis, where the situation escalated even further. Byron, realizing the magnitude of what he had done, attempted to evade capture. But his escape was short-lived. Authorities tracked him down to a motel, and what followed was a tense 3-hour standoff with SWAT teams. The standoff was a stifling moment of uncertainty, with police surrounding the motel and waiting for Byron to surrender. For those involved, the standoff must have felt like an eternity. Time slowed as authorities worked to safely bring the situation to a close. Inside, Byron was holed up with the 6-year-old child, adding even more weight to the already unbearable circumstances. Every moment was fraught with tension as law enforcement tried to ensure the child's safety while also bringing the dangerous situation to a peaceful resolution. Ultimately, after hours of standoff, Byron was arrested, his attempt to flee thwarted. But the damage had already been done. The child, who had been through so much, was finally released from the clutches of their captor. Yet the emotional and psychological scars from the kidnapping and the tragic events would remain forever etched in their memory. After the traumatic events that shook an entire community, the pursuit of justice began. The courtrooms became the stage where the story of Marquicha's life, her death, and the impact of her loss would unfold in front of a captivated audience. But this wasn't just a legal battle, it was an emotional and painful journey for her children, who now had to relive the darkest moment of their lives. 3 of Marquicha's children, including the brave 12-year-old who had witnessed the shooting, took the stand in court. These children, far too young to understand the full weight of what had happened, were now asked to recount the horrifying events they had witnessed. Their testimonies, filled with raw emotion, painted a picture of fear, confusion, and heartbreak. The 12-year-old, in particular, had to face the unthinkable, describing the moment they saw their mother fall victim to Byron's violent rage. The courage it took for these children to testify in court cannot be overstated. Their voices, though young, carried the weight of truth and the need for justice. They didn't just recount the events, they revealed the lasting trauma that they, and many others, would carry for the rest of their lives. As they spoke, the courtroom was silenced, understanding that these were not just the words of children, they were the words of survivors, seeking justice for their mother. The prosecution, using these emotional testimonies, laid out the case against Byron Pipkin, showing the depth of his violence and the irreversible harm he had caused. The evidence was undeniable, and as the case progressed, it became clear that Byron would have to answer for the irreversible destruction he had wrought. The defense, though present, could not deny the brutality of the crime. In the end, Byron Pipkin was found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder, kidnapping, and several firearms-related offenses. The jury, having listened to the evidence and the heartbreaking testimonies, rendered their verdict with no hesitation. It was a moment that, while bringing some sense of closure, could never fully heal the wounds left in the wake of such a tragic loss. Byron Pipkin was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence meant that he would never again have the chance to harm anyone, and it ensured that he would never walk free to cause more suffering. For Marquicha's children, while this verdict brought a sense of justice, it could never undo the damage that had been done. The emotional toll of the trial, the loss of their mother, and the trauma they had endured could not be erased by any sentence. But what the verdict did provide was the assurance that justice had been served, that Byron Pipkin would pay for the life he had taken, and that the family left behind could begin the long process of healing, knowing that the law had held him accountable. For Marquicha's children, the loss of their mother was an unimaginable blow, one that no child should ever have to face. But beyond the loss of a mother, there was the loss of a sense of safety, of the stability they had known. For those who witnessed the brutal events unfold, especially the 12-year-old who saw their mother shot, the impact was even more profound. They had seen their world unravel in the most violent way, a scene that would forever be etched in their memories. The children had lost not only their mother but also a piece of their childhood innocence. What should have been moments of joy, learning, and growth had been replaced by the trauma of violence, the loss of a protector, and the deep confusion that comes with such a traumatic event. For these young souls, the future they once imagined now seemed uncertain and filled with emotional scars that would take years to heal, if ever. The psychological toll was immense, and though the legal proceedings brought justice, the emotional pain of losing their mother, especially in such a violent way, could never be undone. But Marquicha's children were not the only ones affected. The ripple effects of this tragedy reached far beyond the walls of their home. The community, too, was left in shock and disbelief. Marquicha had been known as a hardworking mother, doing everything in her power to care for her children. She was part of the fabric of the community, a woman who represented resilience and love. When news of her death broke, the reaction from the community was one of deep sorrow and collective mourning. People were left grappling with the fact that something so horrific had happened right in their midst, something that they could never have imagined would happen to someone they knew. The tragedy reminded everyone of the fragility of life and how easily it can be destroyed by the hands of violence. This case, like many others before it, stands as a heartbreaking reminder of the dangers of domestic violence. It serves as a warning of how unchecked anger and control can destroy families and communities, leaving devastation in its wake. The violence that took Marquicha's life also robbed her children of their future and left the community with a hole that could never be filled. It highlighted just how important it is to address the issue of domestic violence, to recognize the signs, and to provide the support needed for those who find themselves trapped in abusive situations. As we reflect on Marquicha's story, we are reminded of the profound loss and the devastating impact of unchecked violence. Her life, filled with love and hope for her children, was tragically stolen by the very person who was supposed to protect her. Her story is one of love, of a mother trying her best to build a future for her children, and yet it is overshadowed by the destruction wrought by someone who allowed rage and control to consume them. This was a tragedy that should never have happened, a senseless loss that leaves a family broken and a community grieving. In the aftermath of such devastation, the pain is not just that of the victim, but that of everyone who loved them. Marquicha's children, her family, and even those who knew her in passing are left to pick up the pieces of a life that was taken too soon. It is a harsh reminder of how fragile life can be, and how we must do more to protect those who are vulnerable, especially when it comes to the silent epidemic of domestic violence. This is not just a story about one woman's death, it's a story that mirrors so many others. It highlights the need for change, the need for greater awareness, and the need for action. Domestic violence does not have to end in tragedy. We all have a role to play in helping those who are suffering in silence, in recognizing the signs, and in supporting those who need it most. Thank you for taking the time to watch and reflect on this difficult, yet important story with us. Marquicha's tragic fate is a powerful reminder of the dangers of unchecked anger and the devastating consequences of domestic violence. As we close, it's essential to pause and consider what we can all do to ensure that no one else falls victim to the same fate. Domestic violence doesn't just destroy the lives of those directly involved, it ripples out and affects entire families, communities, and even the broader society. The pain, trauma, and scars left by such violence can last for generations, and that's why we must continue to speak out, raise awareness, and take action to protect those who are most vulnerable. We all have a part to play in breaking the cycle of abuse. It starts with understanding the signs, offering support to those in need, and making sure that those trapped in abusive relationships know they are not alone. It's about creating a culture of care and understanding, where victims of domestic violence feel safe to come forward and seek help, knowing that they will be supported, not judged. If you found this story impactful, we encourage you to share this video. By doing so, you can help spread awareness about the devastating reality of domestic violence and the steps we can all take to prevent such tragedies from happening in the future. Share it with friends, family, and anyone you think might benefit from hearing this message. Together, we can help amplify the voices of survivors, protect the vulnerable, and create a future where no one has to face such violence. Thank you again for watching, for caring, and for being part of the conversation. Let's work together to ensure that stories like Marquicha's become a call to action, not just a memory of the past.